it's not. It is now. Thank you.
Yeah,
Let me
I didn't
just
see
double.
the red dot, so that's what I was wondering.
Let me double check. I've actually got my
I was looking
audio
for that red
set up
dot at the
properly
bottom.
as well. Yeah, my audio was actually set up properly this time. Okay. And then last week, I showed how I modeled this, like one section of this corridor, and then I just lined them up 3 in a row, and how I made the window. So it should, I don't know if it's, I'm gonna redo that whole video. I think, I am. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, just to redo it completely. Yeah, just complete numpty. Anyway, I showed last week how I did the lighting here through the window, and I did that using a cookie on a point light, and you can see it if I go outside, because it's an absolute mess on the outside. But we'll cover that as well. So I'm just going to start by what am I going to do? We'll just create a new scene. Basic built-in is fine. I don't need to see that. And then in assets, I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it temp, because it's just my demonstration folder. And we'll save this scene into my temp folder. And I'll just call the scene temp as well. So there's nothing in here at the moment, but what I'll do is I'll take this box in Blender, the default cube you always get. We'll move it up so it's sitting on the ground. Now, Blender cubes are always 2 meters by 2 meters, so I'll just move it up, G for grab, Z on the Z axis, 1 for 1 meter, and it's in the right place. And I will, using Control and A, I'm going to set the location, and that just moves the object origin to the world origin, to the center of the floor. And then I'll go into tab into edit mode, 3 for face mode, and I'm just going to delete the 3 of those. The ceiling, I'm holding down shift to select more than one face, and then X for delete, and I just want to delete the faces. And that's all I'm going to use, just as a kind of demonstration. So I've got a floor and a couple of walls, and we can see what's happening. And then if you pull down this little arrow here, what's this called? This is called the overlays panel. We can turn on face orientation, and then you can see which way the normals are showing. Now the normals is, let's just open Castle again. I've lost all my baked lighting, but it doesn't matter. The normals, this is a good example, this wall here. This would be blue in Blender because the normal is facing towards you, so you can't see through it. It's got the texture on, it's the bit that's being rendered. If we go to the other side and turn around, you can actually see in. You can't see the other side. So that would be red in Blender. So what we want to do is we want it to have the normals facing inwards, because it's going to be like a little studio scene. So tab into edit mode again, A to select all the faces, and then all I'm going to do is flip the normals.
What selects all the faces?
The letter A for all. And then double tap in A,
not
deselect.
like that.
No.
Okay.
So you've got A to select all, and double tap A to deselect all. That works with anything. If I've got one wall selected, I can still double tap A and it'll deselect everything. So select everything by tapping A.
And then Alt-N for normals?
Yep, Alt-N for normals, and then F for flip, or you can just choose flip from the menu here. But you can see the underlined letter is F. We know that that's the shortcut. So F for flip. And now we've got all the blues on the inside and all the reds on the outside. So the normals are facing in
Can I ask you a
towards the
question real
center of the
quick?
box. Of course you can.
I was just doing this the other day and it was driving me nuts. I had something like this, just a simple object, right? And I put the texture on it.
Uh-huh.
And I go, oh, I really want it on the other side. I don't want it on that side, so I flipped the normal, so the texture went on the other side, right?
Right.
So, how does that affect UVs and stuff when you're flipping stuff like that? Because what happened was I went back and had to redo it. When I went and redid it, it put the texture on everything. Then it stopped putting it, only on one side, not the other, and it threw me off. I was like, why is this happening? Why am I
Was
not
this in
keeping it only
Blender?
on one side?
Was this in Blender or Unity?
Yeah, in Blender. Yeah, it's
In
driving me
Blender,
nuts.
it will always render the
Blender.
texture on both sides. Yeah. It will always render
Oh,
the texture on
but
both sides. However, when you come to export it to Unity, that's where it's different. In Unity, it'll only render the texture on the side that the normal's facing, pointing towards, if that makes sense. So in this castle, as I say, all of these, when you're standing inside, all of these walls would look blue in Blender.
but even on the outside too, you won't get that see-through effect from the outside in.
I'm not sure what you mean. If you
Well, okay,
had,
if this model was in Blender,
mm-hmm.
would it look like this? Or you're saying it wouldn't look like that?
Let's just put a quick texture on this and then see if it becomes
Okay.
a bit clearer. We'll just find a texture very quickly on this handy dandy website. Just find something that's relatively simple. This one looks quite simple. We'll just check what it's going to download. Ambient occlusion, diffuse, normal, roughness. That's fine. We'll download that. Oh, look at that. I've already downloaded it at some point, clearly. We'll cut that. We'll move it into Bank of Projects, My Project, Assets, and we'll stick it into temp folder. So back to Unity. There it is there. I'm just going to unpack it quickly. Okay, I'll just delete that because I've got it unpacked. So there's all the textures. So go into Blender and we'll go to shading. We'll just use the default material, bring in all the materials that we've got. Diffuse, normal, roughness, and then I can close that. So let's have a look, get this set up. We'll move that out the way. The diffuse, just put colour into colour, nice and easy. The ambient occlusion needs to be non-colour data because it's a grayscale map. So change that, and then we'll multiply these together. You don't need to do this in Unity. This is just because of the way Blender works. There isn't an ambient occlusion plug, basically, so you have to multiply it with the colour to get it to work. Roughness, that's a grayscale map, so we'll change that to non-colour, and we'll just plug that into roughness. And then the normal, that has to be non-colour even though it's purple, so that it uses it properly. And we'll have to plug that into a normal map node, and it's colour, colour into colour, and then normal into normal. So that's that. There's it set up. So we'll just do a very quick bit of UV unwrapping so that it actually looks correct. I think what we'll probably do is we'll just unwrap that as one thing, and we'll rotate it by 90, and we'll maybe increase the size a bit as well so it looks a bit better. And then this one will unwrap separately. And then I think what we'll do is we'll use that texel density checker that I showed you the other week. So we'll calculate the texel density on these, set it, and then and that just makes sure that it's exactly the same scale. So there's our unwrapping done. So if I go into material view, you'll see on both sides we've got the texture shown because that's just the way Blender works.
Right.
But if we turn on face orientation, you'll see the blue is on the inside. So in Unity, you won't see it. This will be invisible from this side.
Okay.
All
right.
We'll turn this back on.
I somehow made it invisible on the other side. I don't know how I did it, but
right.
Blender.
Okay. What you've probably done, is it in here? No, in here. What you've probably done is, I can never find it in here though. Let's try turn it there. It's not cavity, backface culling. There we go. And that's
backface culling.
Backface
where was that option
culling.
again?
It's in the shading section. So if you've got it set to basic viewport shading, and then there's a little tick box that says backface culling.
Right.
Yeah. And it's basically the same.
So
I'll show you backface
when I applied
culling.
the texture, it turned it off.
Yeah. So I'll show you the equivalent of that in Amplify as well in the shader when we come to do this in Unity. But yeah, that's basically all that is. So I'm just going to turn that off so it doesn't confuse me because I hardly ever use it. And we'll just export this as it is. So export as FBX, and I'm going to put it into where I've got a Banter project, my project, assets, temp, and I'll just call it, what'll I call it? Walls. Walls will do. Selected objects, because we don't want the light in the camera to be exported as well, and export FBX. And because it's got a material on it, it's asking me to fix the normal. I'll show you what that all means in a moment. This section here, if you look at the inspector, let's just pull this out a bit. The textures, it needs to know what each of these textures are. So this is, you can't actually see the full name there. Let's just pull that out. So you can see along the bottom here, this is the ambient occlusion. This needs to be a grayscale map, and we change that in Blender by changing, let me find it, let's just expand that again, changing it from sRGB to non-color. The equivalent in Unity is up here, where it says sRGB, just untick it and hit apply. And then it'll know that it has to treat it as a grayscale image and just use values of 0 to 1 to calculate the ambient occlusion. This can stay as it is. This is an RGB texture. The normal, normally when you bring a normal in, it comes in exactly the same as the others as default. I'm going to ignore that for now. So this is just default. This is default, but you need to tell it it's a normal map so that Unity knows how to use it properly. So you change that to normal and apply. And then this is roughness again. This is a grayscale map, so we'll untick sRGB and hit apply. And that's all the texture set up. And if it detects that it's a normal map, when you bring it in, that's when you get this box saying you need to fix it. And it'll automatically change it to normal map up here for you. Doesn't always work, so it's a good idea to have a look at everything and make sure your textures are all set up properly.
So when you start messing up those settings, what does the result look like in the material? Is it really getting screwed up looking, or?
Yeah, it just looks weird. It doesn't do things properly. If it's not,
Okay.
for instance, if the normal map's not set up properly as a normal map, the shading will just look wonky. Basically, all a normal map
Okay.
is instead of having really complex geometry, a really complex mesh in which Unity would use the edges of the mesh to calculate how the light's going to bounce off it, you can use a very, very simple mesh and apply a normal map which has that information built into it. So it's basically telling the light how it is supposed to how it's supposed to react with the surface. And if it's not set up properly as a normal map in Unity, it can do things wrong and it can just look weird. You can get weird edges and weird
Can you create your own
reflections.
normal maps?
You can, yeah. Blender is probably one of the easiest ways of creating your own normal map. If you've sculptured something that's really high res, you can make a very, very low res version of your object and then bake a normal map from the high res to the low res mesh. So basically, it's creating an image that will fit your low res mesh, and it'll look as if it was the high res one once you get it into Unity. I have covered that, but we can do that another week. I don't think I'm going to have time to cover that this week, but we can absolutely go through over that another
Fine.
week if you're interested. Yeah. So we'll just get our temp scene up again. And then under temp, we've got walls. So I'll bring that in. And there you can see it's invisible, just the way it was with the back face culling turned off, or turned on rather, in Blender. And so these are our blue normals. So what we want to do is make a texture, or rather a material. And most people would just create a material like this. It automatically comes up with Unity standard shader and you plug your bits and bobs in. But for those who don't know, Unity standard shader doesn't really work in Banter, and never really has done. It's a bit broken. So what I would recommend you do is either use Proxide's standard shader that he's kind of recreated Unity shader in Amplify Shader Editor. Amplify just works in Banter. It's brilliant. It is a pay-for plugin, unfortunately, but it's well worth keeping a lookout for when it goes on sale, as it does regularly. You can often get it for half price. The other option is Shader Forge, which works very much like Shader Graph, similar to Amplify. It's an old free piece of software. It's not supported anymore, but it still works really well. And it's a free option, free alternative to Amplify as well. I've done very, very little with Shader Forge. I have touched upon it in the past in previous videos, but my shader editor of choice is always Amplify. You pay for it once and that's it, and it's well worth every penny. It seriously is. So yeah, Proxide Shader is just on the Discord somewhere. I think it's in Share Something Useful. Is that where it was? Or was it under Shader Works? It could have been Shader Works. I can't remember where it was now. I think I just did a search for his name.
Proxide Shader.
Has he got 1X or 2? Can't remember now. Let's see if we can find it. There we go. That's not it. There it is. There it is. Shows up under Proxide Standard. Just download it. In fact, we'll do it now. Download it. We'll cut it from there. We'll pop it into and projects, my project assets, we'll just stick it in my temp folder. It's a great shader. I've been playing around with it and it's, well, highly recommended. So that's it there. That is just the shader. But if you go into your material,
you use it on the material.
you can now find, there's a menu, says Peroxide, Standard. Just choose one of these. I don't know why it's in twice. And it works much the same as the standard shader. You can plug all your bits and bobs in. Let's just put that onto there. And then we'll plug in the colour. Smoothness, metallic, normal, emission. It doesn't have an ambient occlusion one, but that's fine. We'll miss that out for now. Normal, stick the normal in. However, smoothness, let's just see what he's done here with the smoothness. Metallic, yeah, smoothness.
Oh, you can
right.
edit his shader?
Yeah, it was made in Amplify. So any shader that you share with somebody that's made in Amplify, if you have an Amplify, you can edit it. You can do what you want with it.
I didn't even know that. Wow, cool.
Yeah, and if you don't have Amplify, the shader will work for you. You just won't have the editor to be able to change it. So, yeah, because we have a roughness map, we'd need to convert that to a smoothness map. And normally, because he is using, actually, let's just have another look at that to be absolutely sure what he's doing. Yeah, it is a base, just a smoothness map. We'd need to convert it, and all you do is bring this into a something like Photoshop or GIMP or whatever you use, invert it. All you need to do is make it a negative. So it changes from roughness to smoothness, and then you can plug it in to your material. You could plug it in, but it's just going to work the wrong way around, that's all. A roughness into a smoothness. So now you can see on here, it's looking very shiny. And it really shouldn't be. It's looking kind of wet. Fine if that's what you're going for. But because it's meant to look like rough stones, it needs to be an inverted image.
So you can't do, it doesn't give you the option in the settings to do the opposite of what it's doing?
No, but I could change it. I could change it, but it's going to change it everywhere, like everywhere that uses that shader.
Oh.
And that's not really ideal. So I'm going to make my own shader to use all of these, including the ambient occlusion. So to do that, we just do create, amplify shader, surface shader. I'll just leave it as the default name for now. And then you would either right click and search for the node that you're looking for, but we know that to start with, just as we did with Blender, we're looking for images. This is the image itself that we can just plug in. So in Unity, we can either search for, and in this, instead of image, you don't search for image like you do with Blender, you search for texture. And it's a texture sample we're looking for. Or a quick way of doing it is just to hold down T and click. There are some really handy hotkeys in this. So we need to name it, tell it that this one's going to be the colour. And I'm English, so I put a U in there, so get over it. I'm going to plug that into there. And then the roughness, we're not going to edit the image. Oh, that's not what I wanted. We're not going to edit the image. We're just going to call this smoothness, but we're going to invert it actually in the shader live before we plug it in. So we're plugging in a roughness. Actually, I should change that to roughness so we don't get confused. We know it's a roughness map we need to plug in. So roughness, we need, in order to invert it, we use a node called a 1-, and I just held down the O button and clicked for that. 1-, plug that into there and that into smoothness. There is an ambient occlusion node in Amplify, so T for texture, we'll just quickly call this AO. Plug that into ambient occlusion, and what we got left, we've got the normal. We'll just move that up out the way. The normal plugs in here, and for this we do something a little bit different. If you're not going to be plugging anything into this normal node, you don't have to plug anything in. I'm going to come back to normal in a minute because these are important. Roughness and smoothness work on, and so does ambient occlusion. Any grayscale map works on values of 0 to 1. So if you've got something that you want to be not at all rough, in other words, fully smooth, you want it to have a value of 0. And if you want it to be fully rough, you want it to have a 0 of 1. So every single pixel on that grayscale map has a value of between 0 and 1. So you know exactly how rough or how smooth that image is going to be. And obviously, if you know your colours, 0 is black and 1 is white. So if you're not going to be plugging anything in and you want it to be fully, let's say fully rough, you would want this to be white to start with. Or if you're not plugging anything in, but you want the default to be fully smooth, you'd want this default texture bit here to be black. Or you could have grey and it'll be midway. I would normally choose white for roughness, fully rough. Ambient occlusion, you always want that to be white if you're not going to plug anything in. Because with ambient occlusion, anywhere where it's dark is where there's going to be darkness, little bit of shadow, all those corners of rooms and the little nooks and crannies that you want to be darkened a bit. The normal is different. This, you need to tell it that it's a bump map, and then you need to tell it to unpack the normal map. I'll just drag that out as well so you can see it. And then that gets plugged into the normal. So not only have we set up the texture to tell it that it's a normal, but in Amplify, we also have to tell it that it's a normal as well. So that is the basic thing set up. We've got the colour, the normal, roughness converted to smoothness and plugged in, and ambient occlusion. So if we save that, and we can either choose it from the menu here, or a quick way is just to drag your shader onto the material and it automatically applies it. And then in the material, we've got colour, roughness, ambient occlusion, which is there, and the normal. And that is it, basically set up. That's the simplest PBR material probably that you can do. You could, if you wanted, make an unlit shader. Which is, again, just create material. No, that's not what we wanted. Create shader. Create, amplify shader. And then where it says standard, just change it to unlit. And you'll see all of these options have vanished and all you've got is emission. That's all you can plug in is an image into there, and that's basically it. These things I haven't touched on yet. I think I've always thought it was a little bit too advanced, but if anybody's interested, we can do that another week, where you can actually, using a shader, you can actually offset the vertices of your mesh and make it look like it's animated. They often use that, for instance, with leaves on trees or blossom on trees. And I think it's used, anybody's noticed in the AI gallery, there's a tree on a rock, and I'm pretty sure that the blossom, the flowers on the tree moves a little bit, and that's all done with a shader. So we can go into that one week if anybody wants to. But I'm just going to close this for now because we don't need that. We're not going to be using an unlit shader today. You do have the same options, obviously, in the normal PBR shader as well, the surface shader. So anyway, we've got a material. It works. It's lovely. However, it's not optimized, especially not for VR. If you have a look at, where's it going to show us it? Yeah, well, it does say down here it's 2K. Properties. No, that's just this, isn't it? This inspector. These are 2K textures. And we've got 4 of them. And that is a bit overkill for one material. If you're going to have lots of materials in your world, you're going to get some serious drops in frame rate the more you have. If you've got big textures and lots of them just to make up one material. In VR anyway. If you're in PC, you'll be fine. But if you're using a mobile headset like the Quest or whatever, it's going to struggle a bit the more you've got. So we need to try and get this optimized as much as possible. And we could do it by reducing the size of the images. And you can do that only so you get the best out of it if you're on PC, PC VR even. But if you use an Android, you can override for Android and you can tell it the max size you might want it to be 1024 or 512. For something that's using 4 images, I would get as low as possible, make it 512. However, there's a better way because the smaller your images are, the rougher they're going to look on the mobile headset. So what we could do is to combine, and I know a lot of you, sorry if you've seen all the channel packing stuff before, but I do want to cover it again. Any of your grayscale maps like ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, you can combine them all into one image, into one texture, and then split it up in the shader. And you can basically get rid of 3 textures, just use one instead. And there's a few ways of doing that, but I think probably the easiest way to demonstrate, first of all, is if we open up GIMP, and I'll just bring in an image of some sort. What have I got that I could use? Yeah, we'll use this here. So, Lordy, I should have opened it in my folder first. Show in Explorer. Just drag that into here. So if we go into channels, you can see it's got a red and a green and a blue channel, and in each one of these channels there's a grayscale map. Again, it's values of 0 to 1, and it's telling it with each one how much red, how much green, and how much blue there's going to be in each channel. But it's still just a grayscale map. You can have a look at them by decomposing it. And then under layers, you can see them better. So if I turn off each layer, this is the red, this is the blue, green, and this is the blue. And it's just telling it how much of each colour you can see. And when it's all combined, you get this. So all we're going to do is use each of these channels to hold an ambient occlusion, a roughness, and a metallic map. So we'll close out of that. Now in Polyhaven, not all of the free texture websites do this, but one of the really good things about Polyhaven, in fact, this one came from Polyhaven, the stone tiles, so we'll just download this again. You'll see that you can actually download a channel packed image, and it uses the same setup that I use, ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic. So we can turn off ambient occlusion and roughness. There isn't a metallic map there, and we can just hit JPG. Now I'm using JPEG because it's a smaller file size than PNG. Really, the only advantage in VR of using PNGs is if you're going to be using an alpha channel, if you want any transparency in your image. And these are way, way, way smaller. You can see a 2K JPEG is just over a meg. A 2K PNG is 13 megs. So where possible, use JPGs if you can. So I'm going to download the packed one that's got ambient occlusion, roughness and metallic, and the diffuse, which is the color, and the normal. Unity and Blender both use OpenGL, not DirectX. So always, if you've got the option, always download the one for GL. You can convert a DX1 to GL, but it just means swapping over a couple of axes. That's all it is. I'll cover that another week as well if anyone's interested. But you download that. We've got stone tile wall again. Let's just open that up. And then you can see we've got something called ARM 2K. So I'm just going to replace actually, you know what? Let's just cut it and put it back in here. Inventor projects. My project assets. Temp. Paste it in there. We'll extract it again. Don't want the ones that's already done. So now we should have a new one, which is the bright colours because it's treating it as a colour image. Even though we've got maps in there, it's thinking that we're telling it how much red, green and blue in each channel is going to be. So you get a weird psychedelic thing, but don't panic about that. We'll minimise that for now. So in the temp folder, we'll just get rid of the zip file. We've now got this, which we want to use instead of these two. So if we could double click on our material, and you can see it's got the images plugged in because we double clicked on the material, not the shader. You can actually see which one we're actually viewing at the moment. So anyway, instead of roughness and ambient occlusion, we're going to bring in our packed, or I don't know whether to call it, I usually call it packed. And this one, we want to split it up. So we've already got RGB. In Blender, we don't have that. We would actually have to, let's just assume this is a packed image. You can do the same thing in Blender with packed textures, but what you have to do with this is use a separate RGB or separate color node, which you would plug in there, and then you've got your red, green and blue to do with as you wish. But in Amplify, it's already there. So the red is the ambient occlusion. Plug that in there. We can get rid of that. The green is the roughness, but we need to plug roughness into the 1- and turn it into smoothness. So we can get rid of that. And if you've got a metallic map, you can plug that straight into there. So now I've just hit that to save it. So it's green. We know that it's saved. We could now plug in our packed image, and there it is working again perfectly. And now all we're using, we can delete those because all we're using is a packed image. We could also plug metallic in there if we wanted like metallic edges or whatever, and the color and the normal. And then we could probably get away with, instead of overriding and bringing it down to 512, if we haven't got too many materials, we could maybe get away with 1024, a 1K image. Now, if you got your material from a website that doesn't do this, you've got to do it on your own. And we've got 10 minutes to show you how to do that. So let's just have a quick look, see if I can find something. Don't want that. We want diffuse, normal, roughness, ambient occlusion. Download it. Just move it over again. I'm sure there's a quick, easy way of doing this, but I can't be asked. This is how I do it. So temp, paste, extract. Minimize that. I'll delete that. So we've now got a new folder with new textures in, ambient occlusion and roughness. You could do it in several ways. You could do it in GIMP, where we decompose the image, paste your grayscale maps into those channels, and then recompose your image again. You could do it in Blender, where you can have them each set up, combining using nodes and then baking it into a new image. Or you could do it using something like this, which is a free texture channel packer and it's really quite cool. And I got this from, where did I get it from? Here it is. defconnect.work. You can just do a search for texture channel packer and it will come up, but it's this URL here. It's free. They ask you to donate if you want to, but no pressure. Download it, and then it's got instructions on how to use it, but it's ever so easy. Once you've got it, you literally just add your images. Now, ambient occlusion, if you always consider, am I going to be plugging, what do I want to happen if I don't plug an ambient occlusion map in? Well, you want it to be white, otherwise the whole thing's going to be dark and in shadow. Roughness, yeah, we'll make that fully rough, maybe make that white. Metallic, we'll always want that to be black, not metallic at all, unless we'll plug a map in. It's entirely your choice what you do. You don't even have to use this, the most common setup of ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic. You could do anything you wanted in here. You could have, one of them could be like a transparency mask. It could be a black and white image where maybe the white bits are visible and the black bits are transparent. And you could maybe call that one, I don't know, alpha or trans or whatever you wanted, transparency, whatever you wanted. But the most common and the way I find it easiest to remember is just the name, the word ARM, ARM, ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, and I stick with that. So you plug in your images, and then we need to go to find a project. My project, assets, temp, Rockwall, was Rockwall, I've just downloaded, wasn't it? Yeah. So ambient occlusion, there's my ambient occlusion there. Roughness, there's my roughness, and I'm not going to have any metallic, so I'll leave it black in this particular one. Convert, and there's your weird funky image. Decide how big you want it to be. I'll make it 2K by 2K because I can always downsize it in Unity. export, and then we'll just call this rock wall packed. That'll do. And then in here, there's our packed image, and we just do exactly the same thing. So we create a material. Now this, no, that's not what I wanted. We've got the shader in here. It's just called New Amplify Shader. We can either drag it, it doesn't matter, if you can move things around within Unity and it'll know how to find things. That's not going to be an issue. We could drag it into there, or we could choose our material and just find wherever we've put it. It should be in here somewhere, called New Amplify Shader. Don't know where it is. There it is. That'll do. So we'll plug in the colour. Now I didn't give that a name, did I? Or did I? It's obviously the normal. And then packed goes into there. I'm just going to rename that because that needs to be called normal to avoid confusion. There we go. And we could just drag that onto there. And there is our rock wall, and that normal's not bad. It does kind of look like there's a bit of depression and a bit of texture to it. It's not just a flat looking image. You can see it really well that way. And as I say, that's just a good demonstration really of how normal maps work. It's telling the light how it's supposed to interact with the surface, even though this is just a flat face. There's no geometry to show like rocks and edges and things like that. How we're doing for time? We've got 5 minutes. I don't know. I have covered this in GIMP before, but one of the things you can do, we'll just bring this one in. Colors, is it still going to allow me to decompose? Yes, decompose, RGB. And again, it's ever so easy. You would literally just turn off the ones you're not working on, select the one you are working on, open up the grayscale image in another tab, copy it, just edit copy, go back to this tab, edit paste, and that's one of the channels done. And when you're done with them all, turn them all on, colors, components, recompose, and it brings you back to something like this. So I'm sure I don't know how to do it in Photoshop, I'm afraid, not having Photoshop, because I only ever use free stuff where possible. So yeah, that's the basic thing. Now, oh yes, there was something else I wanted to do. I know we've only got 3 minutes, but I wanted to very quickly go over what we did last week as well. Just so that you're not waiting God knows how long until I redo that video. If we add in a light, I wanted to show how I'd done the lights coming through the stained glass window in the arched corridor. And I did that using just a point light, and I used a cube map as the cookie. So a spotlight needs a flat texture, but a point light, because the light is going in all directions, it needs a cube map, otherwise it won't work. So we've got the light selected, or have we? Why is it hang on, point light? We'll just get rid of that because that's annoying. It only works with baked lights as well. We'll sort that in a minute. But under cookie, I already have a cube map for the stained glass already made. And Again, that's going to be in the video when I redo it, how I made the cube map. But we'll plug it into Cookie. You can see nothing's happening at the moment because it only works for baked lighting. And I do recommend always, always, always bake your lighting, because real-time lights have to be calculated in real time on the fly. Takes a lot of resources, and the more lights you have, the more you'll get a drop in frame rate and performance. And you'll also start seeing lights flashing on and off because there's a limit to how many you can have in the world. With baked lighting, it's done before you even load the world up. It's just a big image with all the shadows and stuff baked into it, overlaid across everything, and it's much, much more performant. So we're going to change it to baked, change this to soft shadows, and it's a good practice to also change this to important as well, so you can be sure that every single light is being baked. And we've got the cookie in, so we'll just create some new light settings, and we'll turn on GPU because it's faster and the quality won't be as great. We'll turn off progressive updates and important sampling for now. And we'll probably, we'll leave it at 40 resolution for now. And we'll let that, it helps if you remember to actually mark something as contribute to global illumination.
This is a reminder.
Oh, shush. Alexa, shut up. So, contribute to global illumination will generate. Alexa, stop. Goodness, thank you. Right, okay. So now, I know.
Take your medication.
Oh, she's telling us 3 times. That's ridiculous.
Take your medication.
4 times. 4 times. How ridiculous is that? So you can see, because the cube map I've got is basically based off this stained glass image, we have got some funky colours now being projected onto the walls and the floor. If I was to take this material out and just change it back to the default material, you can really see it better there. Now that's, if we were to move that and bake it again, probably should have turned off that direct light as well. That helps a bit. Now, this isn't baking properly. You're getting these weird boxes, and the reason is because with the UV editing here, we've got overlapping squares. But if this looks right and you don't want to start moving things because the texture's perfect, what you would do is either in Unity, on your object, let's just find the object. You would.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going over to that event.
Okay, okie dokie. Yeah, we are a little
See
bit
you
over.
later.
Sorry, we're nearly done. Okie dokie. Bye bye. You would either
Bye-bye.
tick the section that says generate light map UVs and let Unity generate light map UVs, but Unity does a horrible job, so I always recommend doing your own. So here under UV maps, this little green thing where it says UV maps, just do another UV channel, and then just, I don't know, I guess probably you've already got it unwrapped, so probably the best thing to do is just to pack islands. There we go, that'll do. And then give it a bit of a margin so that you don't get any overlap where the shadows are kind of bleeding, because that can look really, really bad as well. Just export it again. FBX. Walls, we'll just overwrite it, and then we can rebake the lighting. The second channel, the second UV channel, is always used for the light maps, and there you can see we haven't got any of that weird square blockiness now, and that colour is purely coming from the light. So by shining a light through the window, I got that nice effect on the castle wall, which isn't baked now, but because I baked it in bakery, it doesn't take a minute because bakery's brilliant and quick. So yeah, sorry I've gone over. I did want to go to that event as well, to be honest. So I'll be zooming off in just a second.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, as I say, if anybody's got any questions, I'm just waiting for this to bake. It'll literally be a second, just so you can see that light coming through the windows again. Bing! There we go. All baked. Let's turn the light icons off. And that's all I did. Just use a cookie on a point light. I've got one point light outside of every window, and it just works. And I've made these little lanterns with the same thing as well.
That's very cool.
So yeah, yeah, I do apologise for going over. I know it's after time now, so we'll end the recording. Thank you very much for coming along. I hope I haven't been too confused.